superheroes is designed to distract you from the real criminals. So you have an entire organization called Hollywood, which creates villains and creates superheroes. What are these villains saying? What are they doing? What are their values? What are these superheroes, villains, superheroes, values? What are they doing? Usually the superheroes are going to be acting in response to the villain. That's why they need superheroes. So when you have an industry creating villains, they're not creating villains, they're creating problems that the society needs superheroes to fix. So once they create this situation, they've created a level of consciousness. The level of consciousness of Hollywood and politics is all one and the same, and they're designed to make you love and cherish this reality that falls between the extremes of fantasy in the superhero movies and the extremes of so-called reality in the political, university, educational scene. And since this whole system is designed to maintain a particular level of consciousness that maintains control, over time, as the level of consciousness of the people rises outside, as they break the seams, break the stories of this mind control program, the system has to evolve itself. This is why Killmonger in the Black Panther movie had to be engaging in real world scenarios and had to be a real villain. This is why some people are saying that Killmonger it could be potentially the best villain out there because he's more realistic. The thing is, once you bring reality into a fairy tale storyline, it actually turns the reality into a fairy tale. So now that this realistic villain speaks on realistic perspectives, those realistic perspectives are unrealistic now. They become fairy tale. They become something that could be packaged and pushed in the shelf of crazy, mentally unstable, somebody suffering from post-traumatic stress. So anybody who's talking about anything in and around what that villain was talking about in that movie, they become a target in a sense. They become irrational. They become whatever the system wants that individual or those people to look like. And in the end, what happens? The superhero tells the story of what should happen in society and how they are right. So what's happening is that you have the entertainment industry focusing on glorified stories like, obviously, the global warming program, the Globe Model program. They opened up the Black Panther movie with that. And then you have the biggest part, and why I wanted to make this video, the biggest issue is that, like I said, this is an industry, and as much as they make you focus on particular subjects that benefit the industry itself, like the for-profit industry, the system also creates a layer of distraction, which is what I'm saying is the intention behind industries like Hollywood, politics, and the public education system. They teach you a broken history because an empowered, intelligent masses will disassemble the entire power grid. If you are not distracted, you will be focused on the information that needs to be focused upon. So when you see things like human trafficking going on, pedophilia in Hollywood, pedophilia in politics, pedophilia in the churches, all this, the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, the lying about space, like how many people subconsciously and consciously bought into the globe model theory just from watching the Black Panther movie and having that movie open with a globe spinning and then zooming right into Oakland. It makes it very real for you. This is that programming, just like the transitions in TV shows like ESPN. Like when you see the transitions, there's a lot of globe programming. There's a lot of sexual programming. I mean, I was joking with a friend because I just observed something that looked like it was just like a basketball covered in semen, just like going. It was a transition on ESPN, going across the screen from the top left corner of the screen through the center of the screen and like into your face. And I was like, that was like really invasive, and it because subconscious language is a language. It's an actual thing. If you're looking at the television from a subconscious eyeball, you can see things that you never thought were there before. So I saw that, and then I was just thinking like, and of course they jump between transitions like that in the shows because sex sells. So if sex sells consciously, sex is going to sell even more subconsciously. So if they do those transitions while the game or the show is playing, that will make you more inclined to tune into the commercials that are also going to have some kind of like half-naked woman selling you a hamburger or something like that. So subconsciously, this thing is going on, and consciously. What's happening is, let me finish that story. I was joking to a friend talking about, hey, we need to pay attention to this stuff because that's just some nonsense. And she caught the tail end of it, and it was just like, oh yeah, haha, that's just one thing. One thing, I think I told this story already. The next scene after they played whatever they transitioned to, they showed an image of Big Monday on there with the basketball was like a tip of a penis and a shaft and Big Monday, and it looked like balls on the other side. It was so weird. But the same thing is happening with Hollywood. Hollywood does that on a massive scale. They sit your children down for 2 hours, and they do that with all these movies, with all these cartoons, with all these TV shows, and we don't even really pay attention to what's going on. So what I'm saying is that the industry of Hollywood is designed to deflect and distract from the real villains, the real criminals of this society. The real villains and criminals of this society are the individuals and the groups of people who condone pedophilia in Hollywood, pedophilia in the political scene or political stories, pedophilia in the church. Like Hollywood makes movies about this. They know about this information. They know about the human trafficking, the child trafficking, the women trafficking, the prostitution problem that's across the earth because of this fiat currency system and the way the society has been programmed from the Western morals. Everything, this is the thing that we have to realize. Everything that's happening right now in society is on purpose by the Western ideals. So their ideology of Western ideology, think about it in your head right now. Think about back to the Old West. What was the Old West like? It was just a bunch of prostitution houses, the casino, and the bar. That's what it was. And then you had the gangsters or the thugs and the cowboys and the Indians. And then you had like different groups here and there which were acting in and around that Western reality. And then over time, they realized that they couldn't sell that old West nonsense anymore. So they had to civilize themselves by saying that they were more civilized than the Indians, when in fact, their definitions of civility have nothing to do with actually being naturally civil. Like they have everything to do with distracting and deflecting you from understanding, and overstanding how uncivilized this system and some of these morals and ethics and values are. Everything that's happening in this world, all the pedophilia that's in all those systems, all that sexual programming, all the destruction, the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, lying to you about your cosmology, demonizing the indigenous people, genociding the people all over the place, this racism, white supremacy programming, the division, the new age programming that only goes so far on purpose. Like they're selling you cheap magic over and over and over again, constantly sucking people in. And what I'm saying is that kind of, it doesn't really confuse me, but I guess it's a little irritating at times, is that even people who call themselves truthers, even people who call themselves like flat earthers or whatever, understand that the system has lied about everything, but hasn't really like turned that on to understand that everything means everything. Everything doesn't mean some things. If they lied to you about the nature of the earth itself, then what do you think they're telling the truth about? Why would they tell the truth about anything if they lied to you about the very nature of this experience? There's no reason for them to do that. But you have people so vested in, like, oh, the greatness, whether they know it consciously or subconsciously or consciously, it doesn't matter. They're vested in some way in this system that loves it and needs it and cherishes it because largely there's nothing else. People have been emptied out for so long that when they empty themselves from the empty program, they're still empty. So if you don't find what it is that fills you naturally, you're going to be constantly trying to fill your empty spaces with synthetic fullness, which will do nothing but, MSG your reality, or like what fast food does to your life. So what people are doing with Flat Earth is in asking or hoping and watching the TV for, the TV, the mind control programmers to actually start accepting, the not globe model. That's basically what it's boiling down to, is that it's fast food. You're asking McDonald's to provide you with non-GMO McDonald's, but you're missing the whole point. It's the system itself. They don't care about you. They never did. It never did. It's built on the blood and the bones of caring about people. See, when the colonizers came over to this land, they engaged with real humanity, real people who were connected with nature and each other. Not saying that they were perfect. Obviously, they were, fighting and doing all these other things, but not at the scale of what's happened today and what's been happening in this Western civilization. That's my whole point. We're taught you have to be able to identify the villain and what they are after, what they are against. And you can argue it's us, we're this and we're that, it's up to us. Well, you are you, and then there's another person that says, I don't give a shit what you say. I'm going to take and destroy everything that you love because it doesn't matter. Whatever they have no morals, they have no values. And the same mentality that set the foundation, your so-called forefathers, for this land, they will and have gone to the umpteenth degree of inhumanity when they have genocided and massacred all these people. And now spend an entire reality, have bought and sold an entire reality to distract you from that, to distract you from the truth of this system, of what's really going on here. And if you say anything about it, you're a villain. That's what happened in the Black Panther movie. He was driven by the injustices of the past, the present, and the future across the earth. And that is a threat to the system. So when that threat is noticed, when that threat is recognized, it was balled up into a villain, shoved into the greatest movie of all time, and time is going to tell what they want time to tell it as. So what's going to happen when the greatest movie of all time, it's going to last forever. So that means the superhero is going to last forever. That means the villain is going to last forever. And that means the information that that villain was speaking of will be vilified forever. And you welcome it. Like, you welcome that perspective in there. So it creates this, on purpose, it creates this this unstable kind of fight, this back and forth fight between really being programmed over your entire life to love this superhero and love the values of that. That's what it really boils down to. The kids are automatically going to do that. Yeah, we need to do the United Nations. So when they come into the reality with the United Nations, now it anchors deeper not only in you, because you love the Black Panther movie and you love your relationship with your kid when you go see that Black Panther movie, but in the kids also. The kids want to be superheroes. So if they want to be superheroes, they want to be doing what the superhero does. And what did he do? He went to the United Nations. So when the so-called powers that be in this new world order or whatever use the United Nations to unify the entire earth under their own, global control or whatever, once that happens, you're going to have the kids, the elders, and the middle agers all being about it. They're going to love it. They're going to follow. They're going to jump on board because real change is happening, and it's locked into your emotional body because you follow Hollywood, you follow the alternative news, you follow the mainstream media, you listen to what all these individuals are trying to tell us to think and act and how to believe. And one thing I was thinking about earlier yesterday was I was watching all these like old school people, all these old school veterans wear these old, Korean War hats, World War I, World War II hats where they have the whole thing, what ship they were on and so on and so forth, what war they were in. I was thinking about this and how that represents, like, how could you honestly be against the military-industrial complex when the biggest thing that you take pride in is the peak of the military-industrial complex, which is war. And then the step down from that, you could argue it's even worse, is the prison-industrial complex. So these are all one and the same. These are the values that this criminal system prides itself in. Like, look, it prides itself in war and destruction and death. This is the colonial mentality. The colonial mentality is the Western so-called civilization mentality. So you're actually, if you're not going at the values of this system that is inherently criminal, you're not really a truther. You're not really going after anything. You're just entertaining yourself with information that is valuable, but it hasn't been tuned in to, it hasn't been activated. It's like I said in the previous video before last, the difference between thoughts and thinking. That you can fill your space up with all these thoughts, with all these values, but if you don't do anything with them, they're stagnant. It's potential energy that just dies out. It's like a battery. You can charge the battery up all you want, but if you don't plug that battery into whatever mechanism that you're focusing on, it's all for nothing. And eventually that battery, no matter how much you charge it up, it's going to lose its cells over time because you haven't used it, and it'll just go cold. So this is what the system hopes to do with the batteries of humanity, when constantly over and over again they're living vicariously through superheroes, through athletes, through musicians, through Hollywood actors, through politicians, through whoever the system puts out there for you. Like they're putting out there right now the director of the Black Panther movie and all the actors, and you're living vicariously through Chadwick, and you're living vicariously through like all the actors in there, and your women empowerment comes from just seeing the movie. The same thing with Flat Earth. Your Flat Earth empowerment comes from just being out there talking about it, and having other people talk about it, but actually turning it into something to do something with it is a different story. So this is why, and since that atmosphere is so normal, it's not natural, it is normal. Since that atmosphere is so normal, that's the one that actually makes a lot of energetic money in a sense, where it's a lot of people paying attention to it. This is why you have a lot of people following people in the so-called black conscious community, and they're all about, they just talk. They talk a good game. And so a lot of snake oil salesmen out there that are just talking and talking. You're like, yeah, I relate to that. It seems powerful. It seems, like something that is rooted in something cool and real. That's what, because largely what's happening is that you're surrounded by fakeness. When you look at the mainstream media, your news anchors, the politicians, all that's fake. Like, for them to be saying fake news right now, it's just ridiculous because the entire system is fake. So you can understand that they're using the so-called data. It is using its own observations of itself as a way to deflect from people understanding what's really going on here. So instead of you calling the system fake, it has to co-opt the reality of fake and say, well, that's fake. That's like I was saying in the last video, they need a villain in order to make themselves the superhero. But people are already understanding that the system itself is the villain. But if the villain is saying, no, we're not the villain, that's the villain, it's fake over there, then you're uncertain of yourself. You don't know what's really going on, and you don't know what to say, because whatever you do say is going to be counter to the status quo, your peers, and and where they're going with this is mental stability. Like, if you don't, this is another part of this whole false flag thing that's going on. That's another villain thing. So the NRA becomes the superhero when you have a mass shooting. But they don't analyze psychologically, like, why this stuff is happening, where it's happening. Like, you don't see this stuff happening in areas. The same way you don't see mass shootings in schools happening in the so-called ghettos, the hoods, or whatever. It's the same reason why you don't hear about all this UFO landing and alien stuff in the hoods and all this, in the ghetto and all this other stuff, because people are too real. You have fake-ass people who will sell fake stories and glorify those stories because of whatever reason. They need the attention. They need whatever it is. They're going to do that. They're gonna play that game. But once you start getting around real people, like, that are going to go to the depths and not really have to defend the system. See, when I say fake people, I'm saying people who don't even largely realize that they're fake. An example of this is the people who are trying to defend this Western civilization. That's some fake-ass shit. Like, they don't know, like, or if they do, they've kept themselves from going into the depths of truly understanding what's really going on there. And then it gets really complex when people start calling themselves truthers. Like, oh yeah, I'm a truther now, but I don't talk about that truth. No, I'm not going to talk about that. That's other truth. That's truth. That's uncomfortable truth. No way. We want to talk about happy truth, real truth, stuff that connects you with the earth, and a creator of some sort. And then now truth has an asterisk on it. Now, we can't talk about that truth. That's divisive truth. This truth is more powerful than that truth. So, Why are you talking about that truth? That's that's old truth. There ain't no old truth. There's truth. The shit that's out there. You can only really focus on one of them at a time, but at least acknowledge it. If you're just focusing on one truth, you're not. That's not truth. I mean, in a sense of not acknowledging all the other, like the 360-degree aspects of the truth. You don't have to like talk about it all the time, but it needs at least acknowledge like the depths of this, because that's what it really goes down to. It's like the roots of these programs, because it's so many of them, and as long as you don't go to like push yourself to your own depths, there's no way in hell that this system's going to be affected in any kind of way, because it has contingency plans for everything. Obviously, look how complex it is. Like, really look at the alchemy that went into the Black Panther movie. Look at the alchemy that's in the Hollywood industry and politics and the public education system and your cosmology, your future, cosmology, going into simulation theory and CERN and all this other stuff. Like, they just put that, told people that they put a car in space to orbit around Mars, and grown ass people believe this stuff. So what I'm getting at, and what I'll end on this is the older generation, like this. Okay, so this so-called greatest generation, like that's a mind control program. The greatest generation, largely a lot of them are still alive right now. And this is where a lot of these reasons why you see all these World War II movies and World War I, all these war movies that are out there, is because as long as you keep triggering the superhero that lives off, that bleeds the military-industrial complex, that bleeds Western society, as long as you still are bombarded with, like that movie Dunkirk just came out a few months ago. Like, you really analyze the movie scenes, you'll see the mind control programming every year. It's damn near like 3 times a year, probably more than that these World War II movies are coming out. And you'll see why. Like, you'll see why once you look at it as a whole scope, because Hollywood is an education. It's a when you understand that it's a mind control program, then you can actually see that it's a form of information, like educational information. But what kind of education? What kind of educational system is this locking you into? Obviously, a mind control program, heliocentrism, military-industrial, prison-industrial complex, so on and so forth. So, as long as the older generations remain the greatest generation alive, and they still remain alive, and all of their values are running this program, and they're not held accountable, as long as that remains, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to change anything. So, in yourself, if you're meaning that, because you're not going to be able to change anybody else, I mean in yourself. People who are still having difficulty changing largely are not being able to change because they're holding on to the values of older generations. Older generations that love. This is where Trump came in with the Make America Great Again stuff. Who is he talking to? Is he talking to 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who know about this? No, he's talking to the older generation. He's talking to the greatest generation. And their word is already written in stone. It doesn't matter what they say. It's written in stone because they're the greatest generation. That was a mind control program back in the day. It's still existing today. They're keeping it alive. So this is another expansion of the Hollywood industry, the political industry, the educational industry. It's all an expansion. This is what I wanted to do with this video and how this ties in. And to make it more personal, in reference to this racism stuff and all this other stuff, there's times where I go outside and I can hear people calling me nigga with their eyes. You know, there's times you can see it. You know, people know what I'm talking about. Some people who don't know, you know, who haven't walked in our shoes, they won't know this stuff. Like, this is shit we got to deal with every single day. If you're in certain areas, it's people calling you nigga before you get out the door. Like, you get out the door, you go outside, and this is just, you know, one-on-one stuff. It's happening all the time. A lot of people just kind of brush it off. It's like, oh, yeah. No, this ain't something that's just to be accepted. People just think no. But that's just another example of what I was saying in reference to this whole greatest generation. The greatest generation, their values were lynching people, burning people, blowing up churches. Like, a lot of the people who grew up in the so-called greatest generation, what were the values of that time? This is before the Civil Rights Act. So if the greatest generation didn't even have civil rights, how great could you have been? That's an obvious thing right there. I think I'm going to end on that. If the greatest generation didn't even have civil rights, how great were you really? So this is the shit that we're dealing with right now, is that just like the Black Panther movie came out and said, you know, this is what being black is, this is what African American is, and both of those are mind control programs, but people love it because they live in that mind control program. So telling you that this is the greatest generation is telling you the same mind control programming just back in the day. So their values were and still are great, and they can hold that greatness against you to where your greatness doesn't even matter. It doesn't exist anymore. This is what happened to the indigenous people. You're not great. You're living, you know, by the river. You're living, you know, naturally. You're not supposed to respect the buffalo. You're not supposed to respect these animals, the buffalo, nature. You're supposed to use this. God gave you this land for you to use it and destroy it for your own benefit. That's the simple McDonald's drive-through version of looking at this reality. It's like, oh yeah, of course, that's what we're supposed to do. But people who were in tune with nature knew that there are cycles and systems. Who were in tune with alchemy knew that there were cycles and systems that were to be respected and you were a part of. You are a part of that. And it just takes study, it takes observation, it takes humility, it takes empathy, it takes like a layer, a certain sense of connection and openness to really understand what's going on there. But when you have people who are just, you know, fueling themselves off pride and ego and destruction, and that's what this whole society is based upon. Nothing is actually really going to change. Nothing is going to actually happen. So that's basically what I wanted to share with this this video. It's I'm going to start doing a few of these little ones here and there. Quick and, you know, whatever. I know the audio might not be the greatest, but something different. So yeah, just think about that in reference to like the system itself. Like, people are still having difficulty with a lot of the things that I say on here in reference to holding the system accountable. It's not like I'm doing or saying anything that's not already realistic. Like, it's already, when you saw the Head Right system or the Head Start program, the Homestead program, the redlining program, when you see those top 3 things that were basically set up to put a certain type of person in front of other people, and it's still happening today. Like I said in the last video, look at Hollywood. We talk about representation and finally getting representation, but we don't really analyze the system of over-representation for another type of person and anti-representation for the majority of other people. See, we're so bought into the system that we don't even if we've been so vested into the system that if we hold the system accountable for its own downfalls, we feel that we're holding ourselves accountable for our own downfalls because we're so vested in that system. This is why people can't break those chains, is because so many of those chains have been polished by the people, and it becomes the individual. It becomes who and what they are. So if you hold accountable, if you try to even conceptualize changing the system or the reality that the system needs to change, that's the waiting room. That's the precursor to you realizing that you yourself have to change. And like I said in previous videos, the hardest thing to do is to change yourself. Just to basically be open to change and then actually change. So this is why the system has to be so grandeur, and it just has to be huge, and actors and athletes and musicians and politicians, they need to be paid millions and millions of dollars. They need to be put on television. They need to be superheroes. They need to be, gods and kings in front of you, because you live vicariously through them, and as long as they and it doesn't change, you don't have to change. You feel that you're better than them in some kind of way because you're more real, and you know that they're actually trapped. So that in that trap space, you are trapping yourself because you are basing your reality off of an unrealistic reality. So you're living in unreality when you focus on that story. Hence the heliocentric cosmology and so on and so forth. And the superhero and people just jumping around like WWF star fans for the Black Panther movie, like jumping around like they were celebrating Hulk Hogan or Andre the Giant or something like that. Like, it's the same thing. You're talking about, you have more pride in fairy tales than you do in your own reality. When that happens, something's seriously wrong. That's a sickness right there. But that's the mainstream status quo. Because as long as people are vesting their energy, living vicariously through the system, and the system knows that as long as people are living through the system, and the people are not going to change because the system's not going to change. If the system changes, then the people will change. So it has to change incrementally, or at least have the appearance of changing incrementally. So as long as these little micro changes are spaced out over time, you have the illusion of change in the system. You then have the illusion of change in yourself. And the responsibility of your life, which you've been programmed to reproduce and get a job and be successful and that takes up the majority of your time. So you literally have no time to think for yourself because you don't realize that you're not thinking for yourself. So when you don't realize that you're not thinking for yourself, you have no concept of your responsibility to your own time, to your own thoughts, to your own feelings. And you will allow the system to dictate everything for you. Your thoughts, your feelings, this is what the mainstream news is. It dictates, how you should feel, playing your emotion with all these false flags. And then this like I said, with the villain. And, they tell you what to focus on. They want you to focus on these unrealistic villains so that you do not focus on the realistic villainy, which is the system itself. So when you do that, you're so far out of thinking like, oh, I don't want to be hit by a meteor from, whatever. I don't want to, have the Earth, go into an ice age because of global warming. You focus on that, and you respect this criminal system for also focusing on that because they are your savior. They are your superhero. You focus on that, but you also don't focus on what they're not focusing on. And when they're not focusing on the reality of the boots on the ground stuff, like the pedophilia in the church, pedophilia in the politics, pedophilia in the Hollywood, the human trafficking that's going on, the prostitution that's going on across the earth, the fiat currency system, the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, when they both consciously and subconsciously tell you that's not what you need to be focusing on, because they don't focus on it, you start to believe that, and you accept it. So you are accepting what they accept when you accept their system. So it's so complex that you have people who are calling themselves truthers and priding themselves in all this information, but don't really realize if they're not going to the depths of the system itself, they're still condoning the belief systems. They're still condoning this criminal nature. So, yes, it might feel good to point out what's going on and talk about the 75% of the reality that most people don't, in the mainstream status quo, don't even talk about. It might be empowering to do that, but that last 25% is what will actually get to the roots of the system. You can show pictures of the roots all the time, but if you don't get your fingers in that soil, if you don't get your hands in that earth and rip those roots up, those synthetic roots need to be ripped out of the ground by your own hands. Like, there's no other way that's going to happen. If those roots remain, it doesn't matter if you cut the tree all the way down to the stump. That tree will still grow. If you cut the tree, see, what's happening in the so-called truther community is that people are trimming, cutting the tree, cutting all this loose ends, picking these fruits off, and, oh, this is poisonous. Yeah, this is bad. This is, okay, yeah. And slowly but surely it's being chipped away. But we're not realizing that you can cut, like I said, you can cut that tree all the way down to the stump. If you don't uproot it, if you don't get into there and pull every root out of the earth, that tree you cut all the way down, even if you cut it all the way down to the 99th percentile, you cut it all the way down to the stump and you don't get to the roots, slowly but surely, and like I said, this system doesn't care about time. It wants you to cut it down to the roots so it can grow a completely new and different tree. So it'll look and appear different, but it's not going to be different. It's the same root system. This is what's happening with this New Age community, and why the New Age community doesn't care about anything but itself. It's just a representation of the same thing. The New Age community, at its best, is cutting down the system to the roots, or to the tree stump. But it's not doing anything for those roots. In fact, it needs those roots to survive. And the system knows that, which is why the New Age community is so beneficial for the system, because it's going to steer clear of the storylines that threaten the system. It likes that. This is why the New Age community doesn't talk about racism. It doesn't talk about earthly sort of things. It doesn't talk about colonialism. It focuses on, being a starseed